First thing is, there's a number of key characteristics of what Web 2 is. It's based on standards, open standards, and that comes from the TCP/IP and the HTTP of the web. And now there's a whole lot of higher level standards that are allowing the web to come together. I think the single most characteristic one is participation. That's what it really is, and as we come to it, it's about how do you get value from mass participation. It's spread all over the place. Anything Web 2 is not in one place. It has to be spread out. And it does integrate, it's modular, it's different pieces which come together. So just...
This is the clicker if you get back into full screen.
Well, it's just a PDF view. And there are some definitions behind this. I guess just to give my definition of the Web 2. Distributed technologies built to integrate. So that's the first part of it. So in its nature, it is spread out. It is distributed. You are actually looking to have different pieces of the web come together, but you're building them to integrate. And that's really what Web 2 has come from, is this whole ethos of openness. I think that one of the most fundamental of those has been Google in providing its APIs, which is basically the way in which you can access information and data inside Google to create things such as the mashups with Google Maps. So that has triggered what has been a really accelerating trend over the last years, where if you're doing anything on the web and you want to succeed, you kind of have to be open, provide access to the data and information in various ways. And that's part of, I suppose, this web strategy at the moment, is how do you play that game of where you have to be open, but also you're trying to create some value from that. So what I've shown here in this framework is that there are a bunch of inputs. And on one thing, this is user-generated content. So this is things like people writing, people creating video, people creating audio, people creating buildings in Second Life. But very importantly, it's also opinions. So whenever you link to something, whenever you rate something, whenever you add a comment to something, whenever you bookmark something, these are all opinions. And this is part of the inputs which the Web 2 as a whole worldwide platform is using as inputs to churn and create something valuable. And increasingly those inputs are applications. I think one of the marvels of the Web 2 is that we can not be a programmer and still create new applications. There's things like Yahoo Pipes or Dapper or so on, which are all things where anybody can go in and they can take different pieces of the web and put them together in new ways. And this is all possible. These are applications which are actually really worthwhile. So these are all of the inputs. This is the participation. This participation in terms of content, participation in terms of opinions, participation in terms of people creating things. And then there are some valuable outcomes on the far end of that. And this includes things like people being able to access things more effectively and efficiently. It's being able to find people who are interesting and you like. Being able to make the thing be easier and easier to use over time. To be able to create the collective intelligence or collective wisdom which many people have talked about. And there's a whole bunch of ways in which this happens, including some of the technologies, including this idea of aggregating or remixing. The technologies allow you to bring the different pieces together. The different folksonomies, which are enable, I suppose, a taxonomy, a way of I suppose, defining data in ways that are created by users. Without going into too much depth into this, this is the real point where all of this aggregation of inputs, of participation, is creating valuable outputs. And that's across the open web, which we all participate whenever we open our browser, and also is applicable inside organizations. So one of the questions is, how in organizations do you create this flow from inputs through to something which is valuable outcomes? Just come back to that in 1 minute and just show you one other picture from this framework. It shows a little bit of the landscape. You know, this is some of these have changed a little bit since in the year since this was created. It looks at some of the things that have happened in the Web 2.0 space. And all of these are relevant inside organizations as well as in the consumer web that we all play with. There are ways of sharing content, ways of having web applications on the internet, social networks, which are a really fundamental aspect of the way in which we connect and find people that we want to connect with and do things in novel ways. And critically, this recommendations and filtering, where we're filtering increasing what is already essentially infinite overload, information overload, to find what is relevant to us personally. So if we think about some of the ways in which this is can be applied to organizations, there's some things that are different. One is that there are far fewer people inside organizations than there is in the whole World Wide Web, and that changes the character of what you can do in getting participation. One of the other things that is different is that you actually have far more information about the people inside organizations and what they are trying to do. And this actually means that the search and this way of recommending and filtering information to be relevant to individuals is actually far easier inside organizations. Though in the big picture, globally, we're still very early on in doing that. Still, enterprise search is in the main far worse than what you get in the World Wide Web. But one of the most fundamental reasons is that Google has access to it can see who is linked to what. So Google's intelligence is the world's intelligence because it's tapping everybody having linked or not linked to particular sites and saying, well, I've seen this particularly reputable source thinks this is valid or relevant in this particular context, so that when somebody searches for that, they'll find that. Inside an organization, you don't have that wealth of linking and opinions to be able to tap. So that's one of the reasons why search is not as effective inside organizations. However, what you do have is really understanding what people do in terms of their work, the projects they're working on, their background, their interests, what they've done a few weeks before, who they've been working with, which makes it far easier for somebody to say, for when you're looking for some information or you're in a particular situation. I mean, this goes back to one of the concepts that Jay was talking about.